Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica. Nice to see everybody back today. As always, and for any of you who are new, I'm going to be working in acrylic paint. You can see our painting. There's my hand on this screen. I wanted to do something a little bit inspired by St. Patty's. I thought of the Balik, I think that's how you say it, china that maybe some people have. I don't personally have it, but I love it. So that's what we're going to be doing. Get yourself set up with whatever you're working with. You don't have to work in acrylic paint if you don't have it. I know some of us like to work in watercolor. If you have colored pencils, that's fine too. I'm just going to be working in acrylic paint. So you should have as many paint colors as you have, put them down. I've got a couple of extra colors besides red, blue, and yellow. I've got a green and brown and black, and those are, and white. So those are always helpful colors to have if you have them. And what you'll need, you'll want something to put your paint on. I just use a plastic plate. You'll need your brushes. You'll need some kind of canvas or a piece of paper and a little bucket of water and some paper towels or a rag or something to clean your brush off with. So I'm going to replace the spotlight so you can just see. Great. You can just see what we're going to be painting. And then I'll occasionally put my palette into the view. And sorry for the train noise, that will tell you the timing. But this is, again, what we're going to be painting. So my canvas, I know someone said the last time yours looks blue, and that is true because I usually paint over old paintings with a color, but yours does not need to be blue. I'm going to start with, I made my backgrounds pretty dark. I mixed a black with, I happen to have brown. So if you have a dark and you want to create a dark background, you can create a dark background. If you prefer something lighter, that's fine too. You don't have to follow me step by step. You can make it your own. So what I'm first going to do with my, I know what colors I'm going to make for my background, but I'm going to take like a light brown so I could actually create a drawing of what we're going to do. I always like to start with the table line. So that's the line behind your objects. It makes things look like it's sitting, not floating in space. So I kind of have a line across almost like halfway through at this point. It's pretty light. Maybe I'll darken my brown a little bit. And then we're going to do 2 cups. Let's see, can you see this? Sorry, I'm looking at my screen while I do this so I can make sure you guys see it. So the first cup, really simple shapes. Kind of like a, what is this, like a rhombus? With the top a little curved of your teacup. You could start out always super simple like this. It doesn't have to be complicated. And we're going to have 2, like another cup nesting inside of that teacup. And I'm going to kind of put the other one a little askew like I did in my original painting. So I'm doing kind of the same thing to the side. Always break things down to really simple shapes. Maybe that's too dramatic what I just did. Really simple shapes. Ignore this line right here. So you have the handles of your teacups. 1. Kind of like a half circle. Always, if I'm going too fast or too slow or whatever, please let me know. And the other one, I'm going to make the line that I want darker. And this is like kind of a sketch. So if you make a mistake like I just did, then you could, well, it doesn't really matter at this time. We're going to paint over it. So we've got the 2 cups here. And I'm going to put a little saucer around the first one, and then I've stacked the dishes as well. So it's kind of like an oval that we're doing because the angle that we're looking at this. If you could see that kind of oval around the bottom of the cup. Again, keep it simple. Create a map for yourself for your painting. We can always go over it if we make a mistake. I do that a lot. I go over and over and over things. And then I'm going to put it into stacked on top of another dish. So it's just another circle. See that? So it's 1 dish, 2 dish, and then I'm going to do a 3rd dish. Don't feel too much pressure at this point. Just stay as simple as you can. So those are my 3 dishes. 1, 2, 3 stacked on top of each other. If we have time, and we'll put it in now, just because. What I did was I put a little teapot in the background. So I'll show you on my first one. I put this little teapot kind of faded into the background. It's a little bit off the page. So the way I did that is I thought of a teapot. If you see that little table line right there, I put it right at the edge. Just create a little, kind of like a circle. That can be like the body of the teapot coming off the page. And then the spout. It's just kind of like, I don't know, something simple, like a line that comes off. But you can kind of actually put 2 straight lines if you wanted and a curved line to create that kind of spout. Again, something really simple at this point. We'll add details later if you want to just get a little top on that or the indication of a top. You can see that corner. So if you break things down into simple shapes, it's always easier to draw. So the first thing we're going to do, always, we start from back to front. Whether you're doing a landscape, a still life, you always want to work back to front. And what I mean by that is, this is your background. Then we can do this, our table, and then we go into these objects that are sitting on top of the table. As I said, you can see my colors right here. When I created my background, I wanted to do something a little bit brownish, reddish. So I took my black. I happen to have like this kind of reddish brownish color. If you don't have a color like this, you can take your brown and mix it with your black. You can take an orange and mix it with black. It doesn't need to be the exact same color as what I'm making. And you can see I kind of have this, I don't know if you could see it, this like kind of purpley reddish dark. You can also mix a little bit of blue in with it, which will make it more purple. Up to you. If you have the luxury of having a black, that's great for your darks. Start with something dark, but I try never to use straight up black in my paintings. So all I'm going to do at this point, and you do the same thing, is fill in my background. And when I say that, I mean above my table line. If you put that table line in over here, above that right now, because I'm going to make my table a little bit lighter. And as I always say, a great brush stroke to use is a simple crosshatch, which is basically like making X's on your painting. That creates a little texture. You could see the way I'm doing that right here. If you go a line like the line of your cup, you can get the edge of your brush and do that with the edge of your brush. I usually pour little bits of paint at a time. I don't pour all my paint at a time, so I will take time sometimes to refill my paint. And I'm just giving a coat of paint to my background. I'm going to do this a little quicker because I like to be kind of like a little step in front of you in terms of starting something new, so that anyone who's at the same speed as me can work. And not wait for me to be finished with my background. So I like to think of when you're painting an area like this, it is low pressure, low stress, because, well, it doesn't need to look like anything in that background. So really take it as a moment to just kind of feel relaxed and just pay attention to covering that background with paint rather than making it look like anything right now. Now you can see my paint is a little bit thin. That means you can see through the background, and that's okay. If I was like to continue this and have more time, I would probably give things another layer because of just the quality of my paint. But I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm going to stick with my cross hatching and what I can do. And you can see that background of mine. Pretty dark. I'm going to just move down the page. If you're still working in your background, continue with your background, but I'm going to start working on the table. I'm going to first start out with the color that I have, which is this really kind of dark, and I'm going to think about my shadows. In my drawing, I put the shadows more to the left side and the lights on the right side, and I'm going to continue that. So underneath my plate, this dark that I have, I'm going to kind of put that on my left side. Let's see, I'll move that up a little bit for you. On the left side, and I'm also going to think about a shadow kind of near the teapot that I did. And now a shadow makes your objects look like they're sitting on the table. It's really as simple as that. So now what I'm going to do, besides get more paint and put it on my canvas, is the table. And I'm going to stick with the same kinds of colors. I'm just going to get a little lighter. So my whole painting is not super dark. I'm using kind of like a reddish brown. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it. And you can see what kind of color that makes. Again, to achieve this color, if you don't have this kind of reddish brown, you could add brown to black and put a little red in it, a little bit of blue, because my color's got a little purpley, a little blue. You could also add orange to black. And I'm going to put this down. And you can kind of see the color that I'm working with here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going around my objects. I'm being mindful of the lines of my object, but I always go in a little bit to the lines because I'd rather have more background and then cover over it later than less. So you can see my color, the variation is fairly lighter. The thing that I forgot above is I forgot inside my handle of my teacup. I'm going to put it in over here, this color inside the handle of my teacup. Keep in mind, just because we put this down, we're going to go back into this. We're not going to just leave it looking like this. But I like to lay a lot of colors out first and then go back in with details. Now you'll notice what I'm doing is I'm leaving the area that I put the shadows in. I'm leaving those areas. I'm just kind of painting next to it. I'm not blending quite yet. I know my paint, it's pretty wet right now. It's going to stay wet for a while. So I'm going to put this color down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a fairly clean brush. And I'm just going to smooth kind of over so I get a softer line. So my shadows are a little bit blended. I also like to take my dark and kind of drag them out a little bit and soften all my lines. This one's not so soft over here. Let's do that. This is a different brush. Okay. So this is kind of a simple background. Again, I'm just going to do one thing because I forgot inside the handle of my teacup, and I really would like to get that down. I'm going to put that down quickly. So now you can see we've kind of like figured out where we want things, what we want things to look like, and we will move on a little bit. If you'll notice in my first painting, I really kept a lot of the same colors, even in my teacup. So this background is, again, in the shadows of my teacup, and we're going to do a similar thing. Even this back here, it's got a lot of these same colors. So what I've done is created a lot of values, which means going from light to dark with my paint. So I started out with this dark back here. I went to this, which is just really adding a little bit of light, a little bit of white. And then I added a lot of white, and I got these kinds of shades in here. So you can use, you don't have to, a lot of the same colors, just different values. So that means if anyone has any questions, please, unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Or if I'm going at too fast of a pace, I feel like I start to go very fast because I want everyone to finish their painting. Just let me know. So I'm going to take this same color, right, that I used, which was the black with a little bit of brownish red. We could add a little blue to it. I'm going to add a little more white to it. And you can see on mine, it makes kind of like a pinkish color. But what I'm going to do is take a little bit of blue. I'm going to make my shadows a little bit more purple than pink. I'm adding just a little bit, whatever blue you have, you can add to that. You could see this is going to be a shadow color. Let's test it out. Yeah, it's going to be a shadow color for my teacups. So you can see that right there. The thing is, my shadow are all, like I said before, going to be on my left. My highlights are going to be on my right. That doesn't mean there's not going to be darks on the right or lights on the left. It just means the majority of the colors and values are going to be on the right or left. So I'm gonna think the same way. I'm gonna take my cup, and this is again really simple before we go into details. And on the left side of my cup, I'm gonna put my dark. Even on my second cup, I'm gonna do the same thing. On the left side, this is a chance too, you could, if you don't like your shape so much, you can adjust it at this point. I think mine needs some adjusting. We'll figure it out soon. On the left side, so you have two cups right now. On the left side, there's a little bit of dark.
Jessica, what colors did you use for that?
So I used, I had my black that I used before. I used a brown, but you could see I've got a brownish red color. So if you don't got like if you don't have a reddish brown, I would say add brown and then add a little bit of red. Then I mixed a little bit of white in with that into that color. And then my color was kind of a little bit too pink. You can go pink, more pink if you want, but I kind of like my shading to be a little bit bluish. So then I added some blue. But your color, depending on the paints you have, can vary. So it kind of makes this dull purple because it's got the black in it, it's got the brown in it. Sometimes you just have to play around with the colors and adjust them little by little. And I do that throughout. And sometimes a little variation, you know, if you don't mix that exact same color, I think it always works because you don't want things to look too flat. You need a lot of different tones and colors in your painting. It's not as simple as what I'm doing right here. We'll go into all those details later. So don't panic too much, like the color that you have as a shade.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do with that same color is I'm gonna make my handles that color. Be careful because your background might still be a little wet. For now, my handle is going to be those colors. And I'm kind of going over my initial color. Look at that. So dark, dark, dark. And then the other thing I'm going to do, I'm using this for a lot of things, is my teapot in the background. I'm going to put this same color on the entire thing right now, not the spout, just the body of it. And then I'm going to put it on the bottom part of my spout. And again, this is a time, if you did like a perfect kind of rectangle spout, you can make it a little fancier, dip it down a little bit. And I'm leaving a little white for the top. So again, simple. And I'm going to use this color over here too. So what's going to happen down at the bottom? So if you notice, this is white, this is white. These are going to be lighter areas on my teacups. These areas of plates on the right-hand side are also going to be lighter areas, but I'm going to make my light for the plates be almost the same color as my dark for the cups, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is this plate, this is my dark, I'm going to put it on this side, which means that I'm going to make a darker color for this side. I mean, I'll add more whites to that, but to start us off, I like to, and you should always put in your darks first, because when you're painting, except for watercolor, when you're painting in acrylic or oil paint, it's very difficult to get from, especially if you're working kind of quickly like we are, where things are still wet, get from light to the really dark you want. It's easier to get from dark to light. So always dark first, then your light. I mean, you could always go in and add bits of your dark, of course. I don't mean never, but sometimes. So I just remixed my paint, again, the same colors, and you can see it's a little darker, and I actually don't mind that. I'm kind of going along the area of the plates that overlap right now. Okay. All right. So really simply what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mix one more dark before we start to go into light. And once we go into our lights, then we can start going back in once we get kind of like this whole puzzle figured out, go back in and add details and make it look like we want it to look. So again, this is still a work in progress. So you've only been painting for 15 minutes and we've got a lot done. So this color, again, that I originally mixed, which is my black, which is my reddish brown, and then I added some white to it. I'm going to take a little bit more blue this time and make it bluer. Let's see. And sometimes when you're mixing your paints on your palette, you might not love them and you might put it on your canvas and realize, ooh, this works well, or vice versa. So you always have to test it out on your palette, on your canvas, to make sure it's the color that you want it to be. So you can see my color, it's just a hint bluer than the last color that I made. And I'm going to use it a little bit more sparingly. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it's not bad. You can see it's a little bit different on my plate. And I think I'm going to use it on the left side a little bit more. So now I know we're talking about like values, which is range of dark to light. I'm kind of using a similar value, but just a different color now. So, and that just creates more interest. So our whole painting is not the same. So I put a little bit on the left side and then a little bit on the left side here. And remember, left side is our shadow side. And your painting should look something similar to this. It's not perfect. It's not refined. Now, as I said before, really I like to work, and you should always work back to front. And we did our background, we did our table, we started getting colors for our cups. Our teapot is in the background, and we don't want it to be as prominent as everything else. So what we're going to do is start to go into and think of some details for that teapot. At this point, your teapot might be starting to dry, which is great because we can start to layer colors over it. What I want to do is take the same blue color that I put in here, and I'm going to see what it looks like on my teapot. See, it looks a little lighter on my teapot, and I kind of like that, because if you guys know the Balik China, it's got this kind of, I don't know what it's called. It's like a textured woven design pattern to the plates and to the china. And that's kind of what we're going to put an indication of. So this bluish color, if you wanted to use that same color we were just using, you can add a little bit more white and you can start to get some details in there. So the details I'm going to add, you see, I just put a little bit of light where that spout is. And the top part of this spout, I'm going to put a little bit of light. Same way I did the cup. Not to get too detailed at this point, but if you want to create that little pattern, I'm working with not a lot of paint on my brush. So I have very thin paint and not a lot of paint. This works for these kinds of techniques when you're layering paint over paint and you want to kind of be able to almost see through the paint. You want to see through what you're doing. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. So this light color, I can almost make like a waffle pattern with it. I don't mean do it on the whole thing, but this little indication, I'm making little squares right now to kind of give the illusion of this woven pattern. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if I can pull this up a little bit. Again, very rough at this point, but we can start getting those details down. Essentially what I do is I keep layering and layering and layering, and it gets light to the point that you want it to be. So I've got that bluish color down there. Let me take my palette and put it. And our teapot's not finished, but we'll move on to the teacups and go back and forth. I'm taking my white, you can see I've got like my dark with blue. I've got my kind of brownish and black, and then I pulled the color over and I'm mixing a little bit more white to it. Because what I want to do right now is take my cups, and on the right side where my light is, I'm going to put light down. And that's a little bit too light for my taste, but you can see we can get paint down. I'm kind of, at this point, leaving kind of this sharp line between the light and the dark, because we're going to go back into it, but I'm covering over my drawing. And I'm also going to pull this light a little bit. If you have a thin enough brush, I'm going to use this brush, but if you have a thinner brush, a little bit over to this side to make the lip of the cup. That's just a little detail. What you can do too, you can soften. I could bring in some of the white into that, break up that kind of line. And I could use that for pattern. I'm not really blending. I'm kind of just bringing over a little bit the light and softening that. So that's the first side, the first cup. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the second cup. I'm going to pull out, let's see, if your white is too light, just mix that color that we had back into it a little bit. And I'm paying special attention to like the rim of the cup. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to bring over a little bit of light there, and then I'm going to round the cup, the oval part of the, and I'm going to create that inside of the cup. Everybody okay so far? This is a little bit of a tough one. Okay, I'm going to take this light color. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm not going to go. I'm going to leave a space of my canvas in between each of the cups because I'm going to put a little bit of darks to separate the cups. And since I have this light color, again, you're using a lot of the same colors, a lot of the same palette. I'm going to put a little bit of the light right on top of the handle. And then a little bit of the light right on top of this handle. Kind of pop out that handle. So you can see I left some of the dark and then I put a little bit of light there. I'm going to move down to the dishes. And little by little, we're going to get everything filled in. And like I said, then start adding some details. And we're good on time. So with the dishes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if you notice, like what I'm doing is I'm really focusing on like kind of the rim or the edge of things. Focus on the edge of things. That's how you kind of like separate things, separate the dishes from each other. So right at the line that I had drawn before to separate that first saucer, I'm putting in a line of white. That's kind of where your the light catches usually, right at that rim. And I'm getting a little bit of white all around. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. And the only way to really get really light is to get dark. So we always want to, we got the majority of our darks, but we'll go in with more darks. 2. And then 3. If you remember, you still have like the canvas showing. So I'm just trying to get the whole canvas covered. Okay, so this is not bad. The last thing we need to think about is the inside of this coffee cup. Now, if you want to have coffee in there, you can leave it that brown color, but I'm kind of keeping them empty and stacked. So again, as a reminder, for our dark, we have our black, we have our reddish brown, we've got a little bit of blue that we can add if we like it to be more blue, and that could be one of our darks. Inside the cup, on the right side, I've got this color because I don't want a brown necessarily in my cup. Let's see if I'll add a little bit of white to that. There you go. We're kind of doing the opposite. On the left side, we're doing light on the cup, and the right side, we are doing dark, just because the way the light was like hitting it. All right, now here comes the fun part, because we've got everything. You should have pretty much everything, everything on your canvas, if you're working in paint, covered at least. If you have some thinner brushes, great, use them. I have these kind of round brushes, some are thinner than others. Use what you feel comfortable with. If you need to get a fine point on your brush, all I do is take my brush and roll it in the paint, and that creates a finer point, thinner point. I'm going to go in with the darkest dark I can, which is my black. For me, again, this like reddish brown. And I'm going to go in with a thin brush. You can see my brush is pretty thin. Let's see here. I see grandchildren jumping in the background, Alice. Or somebody. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to refine at this point, and I'm going to take this dark and I'm going to, oops, that was a little too thick, go as thin as I can. What I normally do if I need to get a thin line and things are wet, I put my pinky down on my painting so I don't just drag my hand, and I steady my hand if I need to get a line. And I'm putting down a little bit of a line. You can see my hand's not super steady. A little bit of the line on this part of the dish right there, just kind of pulling things out a little bit, refining them. I'm going to get a little bit more dark, a finer line underneath our cup, our first cup. I'm creating some shadows, some more shadows in between our dishes, which look a little wonky right now. They won't look like that for long. You could also clean up any areas, like I forgot some dark in here of my background. You can notice I have this like blank area, so I could kind of fix that. You can see I'm not doing lines that like go around the whole entire dish. I'm doing areas. So you can see I put a little bit on here, a little bit on the next plate. I'm going to do the same thing on this second plate. And I'm going to have a little bit of dark, a little bit of dark, kind of outlining a little bit and creating shadow at the same time. Then I'm going to let our no line happen here and then go back in with a line here. And you can see how that starts to pull things out, right? It's starting to define things, but not in a way that outlines. Your eye kind of finishes these lines, so you don't necessarily need to finish it. And then the last part is this dark right along here. This is like enhancing our shadow a little bit. And if I need, you know, if I want it to be darker, I'd add a little bit more dark, a black. Oh my God, what's there? And that's creating a little bit of a shadow, or kind of like clunky dishes. Okay. The other detail that's fairly important is your saucer, right? Dips down usually. You can show that with a line. And I'll put in a little line over here to look like it's the dipping down part of my saucer. That makes any sense, dipping down part. Okay, and then let's see, I might at this point, for me, I know my background is really dry now, which is really nice. So if there's any areas that you feel like you need to touch up, like for instance, for me, this area, giving it another layer would really make it nicer. You can do that at this point. And if there's not, I'm not going to do really much. I'm going to keep moving on. But you can go back and forth. When you notice things are dry and you need to give something another layer of paint, or you need to add something, do it. Take advantage of the paint being dry. So, sorry, not to get off track too much, but I had this color and I wanted to use it. So these same lines that you added, you can use this same color, which is your black and your brown, and you can create the inside of your little teapot, just like a little line. That inside the spout there. That's creating some detail to the spout. I'm also going to pull this color and I'm going to bring out my spout a little bit. Again, it's an outline right now and a little bit underneath my teapot. You can see what I just did there. Now, because our teapot, like I was saying before, is in the background, we're gonna finish this right now, and then we're gonna move on to the cups. So you'll notice I jump around a lot, but I like to get the canvas covered with paint before we go into details and then kind of work again back to front. And that's why I was encouraging you, if you have some areas in the background here that you need to cover or give another layer to, go ahead and do that at this point. So your teapot also should be dry at this point. Mine is. And again, I'm going to use these same colors. I'm going to take my black paint. My colors are starting to dry a little bit. I might have to replenish because I could feel them drying on my plate. My black with my brownish red. My palette is not so clean anymore. And a little bit of white. That kind of, you can determine what the color looks like when you add the white to it. And then again, I like my color to be a little bit more bluish. So I'm going to add a little bit of blue. I have like this darkish blue. It's like pretty basic blue, but. And let's see if it's too dark or not. It's pretty good. So for me, if you made that kind of like little squares, those kind of waffle pattern on your teapot in the background, you can use some of that dark to go on the inside of those squares. And again, we're not getting too detailed. I've lightened it up a little bit too much. And I'm leaving the white that I did, but I'm creating a little bit of a pattern on my teapot. And I'm not getting too crazy with it. I don't want it to be all over my teapot, but I'm taking little squares at a time. And I'm creating that pattern. The other pattern that is interesting on the teapot is it's got these, I don't know, 3 ridges or 2, 3 ridges. 1, 2, 3. And you can see I'm doing a curved line over here on each of those ridges. Let's see, I can pull that up a little bit. My spout. And first, I'm going to add a little bit of dark. There's little, again, these patterns are really beautiful. Little lines coming from each section going back and forth. So this is where like our details are coming in. That'll really kind of make things look interesting and beautiful. See that? My teapot looks a little funny, but I'm going to keep it the way it is. So I added the dark, right? We added those dark lines, and I'm going to use, again, that same color, add a little white to it. If it's too gray or not interesting enough, you could add a little blue to it. You can add a little red to it. Essentially, we're making a dull purple. You can dull the colors in a variety of ways. One of the easiest is take a little brown. So I want a light now, because now we put in for that background, that's as dark as the darks are going to get because it's a little bit in the background. The same way that I added these darker lines, I'm going to add a little too white. I'm going to add lighter lines on the inside of those darker lines. Do what you can. I mean, this is like really fine detail work, but I want both the dark and the light. I'm going to focus most of the lights kind of towards the top. The important thing is there should be a light around the spout of the teapot, at least part of it. There you go. We can also put a little bit of that light just in that waffle pattern. I wouldn't say make perfect squares. I'd say just like little dashes and lines to kind of enhance what you did. And I forgot about my little top, so I'm just going to put a top in light. Again, at this point, if there's something that you don't like about, like, for instance, for me, like I want this to dip down a little bit, I'm just going to add that. You can add it at this point. A little teapot. And we're going to do kind of similar to the cups. We're going to get some details down in our cups now. So let's see what we're kind of missing. I think some really light lights we're missing. Over here, we can start our waffle pattern the same way that we did it over the teapot. Let's see. I've got, it's pretty subtle. Again, the same light right there. I'll go back and forth just like we were doing before with my light. Kind of have some dashes and dabs, kind of in the square pattern. Make a couple of little squares, kind of an indication that there is some kind of pattern on there. You could do the same thing with the top one. Little squares. I let it kind of like fall off on the left side, but on the right side, I really focus more on it. There's no really right or wrong way to do this. You just want an indication of texture. The plates don't have that kind of detail. So since we've got this lighter white, I'm going to, and we did this before, but I'm going to enhance it a little bit more. I'm going to get a little bit more of a highlight right on the tip, the rim of the cup. I'm going to get a little light on the inside, so the outside of the left side, right side, and the inside of the left side. A little bit of light. And if it gets too light for you, then you could just take it and darken your color. Also, I'm going to pull out more light on the top of the handle. I'm going to put a little bit also. These are all kind of like details. On the left side, a little reflection. A little bit of light right there on the other handle. Just like everywhere that the light is, kept being caught by the dishes and the cups we are putting it in. And usually it's like little kind of bits of light. So you could see again with a focus on the edges of things and the rims. And we did that before, but it's good once it dries to put another layer, sometimes a little lighter if you feel like you need to put a little lighter, or a little darker if you need darks. And then right in the front here. Okay. So I think at this point, what we'll do, let's see what we are looking like on time. Okay. Now, this obviously needs more work on mine, but what I want you to see, and you can go back into this and you can do more blending as you work. What I think we'll do right now is I think that we can get to the point that we can add some of these details, which will really make things look pretty nice. And the details are, there are shamrocks on this kind of china. And so we'll put some of those details in. We can still go back in if we wanted to work on our plates or work on other things later and after. If I'm not here, you can do that on your own as well. For green, if you don't have green, so we're kind of changing gears a little bit because we're worked with all the same colors. And now we're going to work with some different colors. If you have a green, great, use your green. If you don't have a green, you can use blue and yellow. At this point, I would clean your brush off. Any brushes that you're not using, try to keep them in your water. My paint is drying fairly quickly, so you want to keep them in the water so they don't dry. And you can always come back with your other colors and go back in later. So I have the luxury of having green. I'm going to take my green because it's a very bright green, and I'm gonna always start with a little bit of dark. So I'm going to take my, let's see, brown, and add a little brown to my green. And that's just going to darken my green a little bit. I might even take a little bit of my blacks. My brown's not super dark. You might be able to see that little bit of difference in my green. So the pattern is fairly distinctive. I'll do it on this bottom cup first so you can see it is, let's see, for my other painting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clovers kind of attached by like a little vine. And the way you can do the clovers is pretty simple. There are 3-leaf clovers on there. One, you can kind of put like 3 little dabs together. See that? So I'm going to take one, then I'm going to put one a little bit down further and a little further out. Again, probably everything is pretty dry right now. If it's mixing a little bit with your whites or your darks. So 2, a little further down, a little bit to the right. I'm kind of making like 3 dashes going 3 different ways on each clover. This next one, the clover is facing down. Again, it's not a big deal if you can make it however you want. This is just the way that I'm doing it. 2, 3, and then this last little one kind of over in the corner. 1, 2, 3. Super simple. That little pattern. Since I have this green on me, I'm gonna the handle is also kind of this striped green. You can see I'm putting this green on my handle with little stripes, kind of like a candy cane. See, kind of move this up when I'm doing it a little bit. And this one, the same thing, some like kind of stripes. But I'm focusing more on the inside of the handle. I mean, these details looking exactly the same, don't need to, but since this cup, right, these are the same set, let's put over here. And one there. We can probably even put a little one, an indication of one like here. And if you want to make your clovers more perfect, then go for it. I'm just adding, since I have this color, I'm doing all of the green parts at once. And then we'll go in with like the little kind of vine. So on the dishes, there's also an indication of clovers. So I'm going to put kind of little bits of green in certain areas. You can see like an indication that there's clovers, not as clear as on the glasses. So I focused on the left side and then maybe 1 or 2. I'm sorry, focused on the right side, on the left side. The last place I'm going to put this green is right on my, and if you see it on yours, teapot, on the top of the teapot, I'm going to just make that green because you can barely see mine. If you have a little more room, you can put dots or clovers or whatever you want. We have just a couple more minutes, but I'll show you what else we're going to do quickly, and then we'll connect all these little details. So even though these clovers are kind of like painted on, there's should be a little bit of light on them. There's usually light and dark in everything. I'm going to take that green I made with the dark in it and put a little bit of white in it. I'm going to make a nice like light green. And on each clover on the cup in the front, I'm going to put a little light. Oops, that's not very visible. We'll do a little more. A little light, not covering the whole thing. I don't know if you could see that on that one. I'll do it on this one. See that just adds a little extra dimension. I'm focusing more in the areas that are light on the cup and less in the areas that are dark. But even like these down here, you can put a little bit of light on each one. Okay, the last thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna clean off my brush. I'm gonna pick up some brown. We're gonna kind of connect that, those clovers together with a little bit of a stem. So I would suggest taking whatever brown you have. And if you want it to be a little darker, mix it with your black. If you like the color that you have, leave it. And we're just gonna connect with a thin line, as thin as you can get. Remember, if you need to make your brush thinner, what I do is roll my brush in the paint with my hand, and I make like a thinner, let's see, thinner line. There we go. And a thinner point. So I'm just making my color a little darker. It was a little too light. You can't really see it probably. There we go. You can see that. Connecting them. Connecting this. Each one. There, connecting it. And the same thing with this. Connecting these. And you have a little kind of clover. All right. So at this point, for me, for instance, I would go back into these dishes because I feel like I didn't finish blending the colors. You could get in more darks, more lights. If you feel like your painting is complete, what you can always do is sign your painting. You should always pick a color that is in your canvas, in your design. You could even pick green if you wanted, but I would suggest maybe like the lighter purple, and sign in an area that has space, first of all, and maybe is below in an area that's not as busy. So you can see my right side. Well, it's a little less room. If it was me, I would sign probably on my left side a little bit, like kind of underneath my dish, but that's up to you. So you can go ahead and do that. For me, I'm going to spend my next couple of minutes, because I said before that background bothers me that it's so thin, putting in a little color in my background, another layer of color, because those browns didn't cover. And you can see if I start to do that, I feel like I kind of complete my painting a little bit. So this would be a time, you know, depending if you're going to keep working on this, great. If you're not, it would be a time to any touch-ups you need to do, anything you notice that you might need to change or alter. You can go in and clean up edges. I take the edge of my brush, so like here, and kind of go over so I can make a clean line. So things like that you can do. Always in the last couple of minutes of your painting, it's a good idea to see what you need to fix or change or go over. So you can see like I have these little spots here.